Hello, and welcome to the Crane Bag Podcast. I am Jay Leeming. We have a story coming towards us. A story of Finn MacCool and the Fianna. A story from Ireland. Finn MacCool is a magical warrior and a poet and a druid as well. He and his band of fellow warrior poets defend Ireland against attacks from the outside world, both the human world and the unseen realm. As usual, this story is completely unscripted. I am not reading anything. I'm just telling you the story. I'm just remembering the events of this story. Strange things could happen. Unexpected things could happen. I'm glad you're here. Shall we begin? Of course. Let us begin. Story. Come, be welcome in this moment, wild animal of breath that you are. Strange bird of a plumage, of a multicolored nature that we have never seen before. Come rest for a little while on the branch of our listening. Come visit this tree of this moment where we sit. We offer you our attention as we offer water to the river, as we offer gifts to the unseen. Come here, please, reindeer antler that you are, strange snowflake that you are, with many glistening, sparkling sides. Snoring of the porcupine that you are, wild magic that you are that cannot be named. I call to you in these words. Come here, be with us, please. Well, once it so happened that Finn MacCool went hunting in the forest. He went hunting with his two dogs, Bran and Skjolden. And they went joyously through the forest, all three of them, happy to be there. The sun shining down, the wind rushing through the branches of the trees. And the dogs, for their part, they smelled the ground. And with each snort of that ground, they could ingest the flavor of that earth and know the past and quite possibly the future of what might happen. They could smell the tracks of the mice. They could smell all the music left in that ground by all the animals that had gone there. And now and then they caught the scent of a deer. And so they found a particular deer, the track of this deer, and they began to follow it through the forest, this way and that. An invisible track that Finn MacCool could not see. And after a while they came to the deer itself, herself, himself, and this deer, this wild fawn, began to run wildly away through the forest. This deer took them to the north, to the east, this way and that, perhaps to the west. Around in tangles it went, running away from these animals, attempting to kill it. At last the deer came up into the heights of the mountain known as Slieve Gullion, and Finn followed, running after those dogs, running after that deer. At length they came to a great thicket of oak trees. And this fawn went into the oak trees, and the two dogs followed, and Finn followed as well. But as soon as he got into that thicket of oak trees, Finn could not see the deer or his dogs. Where had they gone? They just vanished. A moment before, barking, yipping, the following of these dogs after the deer. But then suddenly they were not there. None of them were there. Only the trees and the wind. He called after his dogs, called for them, but they did not come. Where had they gone? There was the sound of his feet in the leaves on the forest floor. There was the wind, a few birds. He could see no deer. He could not see his dogs. Well, he looked around in consternation. Then he came to the edge of this thicket of oak trees. He looked down. There was a long sloping hill, the side of the mountain, and there was a little lake down there, a small round lake. He could not see his dogs. He looked around in the other directions, up, around, into the forest. Where had they gone? Then he looked back at that lake. There was a boulder by the side of this lake. There was a woman sitting on this boulder. Had she been there before? Had she been there and he just missed her? He wasn't sure. He walked down through the forest. He walked down through the grasses to this lake. And there was this woman sitting beside the lake on the great stone. He looked up at her, and he said, "Dear lady, have you perhaps seen 2 dogs running around here, perhaps in pursuit of a deer?" She looked at him, and she said, "I have not seen 2 dogs. I have not seen this deer you speak of. But my heart is so filled with sorrow, I doubt I could see anything clearly right now." And Finn said, "Dear lady, what is this sorrow that weighs on your heart? Tell me, and I will do what I can to solve this sorrow." And she looked at him with winter in her eyes, and she said, "Finn MacCool, I have lost a ring of red gold. I have lost it in this lake. It was very dear to me. I put you under a geish to get this ring for me, to retrieve it from the waters of this lake." Now a geish, you should know, was an iron bond. It was an agreement you stumbled into as you might stumble into a cavern in the side of a mountain. It was an agreement you could not break without dying, if death is to leave the community, if death is to be exiled from the community. It was a command. It was a binding agreement you had stumbled into. Finn had no choice. "I will find your ring, my lady," he said. So he dove into that lake, into those cold waters. Now this lake was not gigantic. It was not large. Still, though, it was a lake, the bottom of it stony and mucky, covered in dead leaves. He felt around with his feet, walking around this lake, through the waters. And then he closed his eyes and he listened inside, remembering the knowledge of the salmon of wisdom that had gone into him, hearing in that moment the tracks of the world, of all the events of this world, galloping, cantering, dancing across the landscape. And using this knowledge, eventually he found that ring. He brought it up, sparkling, dripping from the lake. He walked back to that boulder. Standing in the water, he held it up to the lady on the stone. "I have found your ring, my lady," he said. "Ah, wonderful," she said, "wonderful." And she reached out and she took that ring of red gold and put it back on her finger. And then she said, "Finn MacCool, do you remember the time that I asked you to dance and you refused?" Finn looked at her. She did not look so familiar, but something in her eyes was something he'd seen before. And then he thought of a field, and he thought of children dancing in a circle, singing in that field. And he said, "I think I do, my lady." "Good," she said, "good, because I remember it also." And she turned and took a step away from that boulder. And with that step, Finn grew 10 years older. And with another step, he grew older still. She kept walking. He staggered out of the water to the shore, already wrinkles covering his face, his hair completely gray, his back hurt, creaking. She walked, and she kept walking. And with each step, he got older and older. Soon he felt 100, 1,000 years old. "Ah!" he said, "help!" And he fell down in pain onto the shore of that lake. He looked for her. She was not there. She was gone. He heard the whistling of the wind through the grasses. He felt his body aching like it was made of dust, fragile old driftwood that could break at any moment. "Help!" he said. "Help!" No one was there. No one came. He could not move. He could not get up. It would take too much effort. He was too weak, too tired, like a spider web in the corner of a barn, so frail, could blow away at any moment. He lay there looking at the clouds, and then he slept, and darkness covered the world. Well, back in the camp of the Fianna, in the forest, they were used to Finn going off into the world on various adventures, so they didn't trouble themselves too much when he did not come back that evening. But the next day they began to grow curious, and a little concerned. Conan Mowell, the burly man who will go through a door if it's open or if it's closed, he began to say, "Where's Finn got to? Where's he gone?" Kielce, the poet and the sprinter, the runner of the Fianna, he wondered as well. And Dermot, the charming, generous one, well, he wondered also. So the three of them set out into the forest, and they went looking for Finn. They went here and they went there, using their own skills at tracking this way and that, searching for Finn MacCool. Finally they came to the mountain of Slieve Gullion. They wandered up it, looking for Finn, calling his name. "Finn! Finn! Where's he got to?" said Conan. "I don't know. Where could this guy be?" They went up to the side of this mountain, up near the top. They came to a thicket of oak trees. They wandered into it. "Finn! Finn! Where are you, Finn?" He was not around. Only the trees, only the wind whispering. They came to the edge of these trees. They looked down. There was a little lake. Beside it a stone, and beside that stone there was a man sleeping, lying there. What's that? All right, so they went down the side of this mountain. They went to this stone, and there, beside the stone, was an old, old man. Well, their footsteps awoke this man as they came down, and he woke up, and he looked at them, and Dermot knelt down, and he said, old man, we're looking for a man named Finn MacCool. He was probably with 2 dogs. Have you perhaps seen him around here?" And the man said, Who? And Dermot said again, patiently, he said, "We're looking for a man, a friend of ours named Finn MacCool. He was hunting around here with 2 dogs, and we're wondering if you have seen him." Who? I don't know," the man said. And Conan Mowell said, "The man's an idiot. Come on, let's go. Let's go find somewhere else. Finn might be out there somewhere, under a spell of some kind." "I know," said Dermot, "and this old man might have seen something, so let me ask him." And he was about to ask again, when suddenly out of the forest burst Bran and Skillan, the dogs of Finn MacCool, and they came running down the side of that mountain joyfully, and they ran to that old man beside the boulder, and they licked him all over, yipping and licking him happily, glad to see him. And Dermot took another look, and he said, Finn, is that you?" And the old man said, Finn MacCool. That's my name." "What's happened to you, Finn?" Under a spell. Take me to the hill of Manannan's hill, the other side of the mountain, please." And Conan said, "Finn, you're in a bad way." "He knows that, Kielce. Let's get him up." So they bent down. They lifted this old man who was Finn MacCool. They lifted him and they carried beside that mountain around to the backside, and they came to Manannan's hill on the backside of this mountain. And they lay him down beside this hill, this mound of earth. And when they did so, Finn MacCool fell sound asleep, exhausted by this weird voyage around the side of the hill, this weird voyage through thousands of years. "What do we do now?" said Conan. "He said there was healing in this hill," said Kielce. "This hill is the place where he must be healed." "Yes," said Conan, "but how? What are we supposed to do?" And then Dermot said, "Well, perhaps we should dig. Maybe there's something here, some magical tool of some kind." And so they began to dig. They dug all that day, digging down into the earth of that hill, throwing it this way and that into piles. They did not find anything, though they dug all that day until the sun went down. And then amid those piles of earth, they slept. Well, the next day, they continued to dig down into the earth, down into this hill. Stones they found, old sticks, a few bones. They threw them here and there. "What are we looking for?" said Conan. "I don't know," said Dermot, "but the answer must be here. The answer must be in this place. It is what Finn said." Kielce tried to wake Finn MacCool up. He could not be woken. Sound asleep like a stone sleeps under a weight of snow. So they dug down into the earth, through the layers, through the memory of this earth, which lives in the layers and the stones and the old dirt, piled upon piled over many years. Down they went, and then the second day ended, and the sun went down. The stars shone down, and they slept, and perhaps they dreamed. Well, the third day, they continued to dig down into that hill, just digging madly down and down into that hill, when suddenly, in the middle of the afternoon, There was a great crack of thunder, and suddenly the earth shook, and strange riddles, cracks opened up in all directions away from that hill, went sprawling away. And out of this hill, suddenly, there stepped a man in a cloak that was blue and gold. And he had a goblet in his hand, a gold goblet carried in his hands. And he walked from that hill of earth straight to Finn MacCool. And he knelt down beside him, and he said, "Finn MacCool, drink this. It will heal you." And he handed the goblet to Finn. And Finn drank the healing potion inside that cup down into his bones. And as he did so, birds began to sing in his left shoulder, and springtime blossomed in his right shoulder, and in his knees summertime came, and the rivers locked up in ice and in winter began to flow. And his body felt like it was made of singing birds and animals of all kinds and blossoming branches and flowers blossoming in his chest. And his wrinkles went away, and his back did not feel so sore and old, and he found he could stand up. He was young again. He was young again. And the man in the blue and gold cloak said, "My daughter is a bit of a prankster, but still, the dance of this world should not be refused. Be well, Finn." And he turned, and he walked away from Finn MacCool and back into the hill, going down between one of the cracks in the earth into that hill, and he was gone. "I am myself again," said Finn. "Yes," said Kilcha, "it is good to have you back." And Conan said, "Finn, let me have the dregs of that little potion you have there." So Finn handed him the goblet, but as he did so, as their hands met in the air, there was another great shaking of the earth as though to shake them all off, and thunder cracked, and all those cracks and riddles in the ground sealed themselves up once again, and the goblet tumbled out of their hands and fell down into one of those cracks and was gone and could not be found. "It's not for you," said Finn. "No," said Conan, "it's not for me." Well, that day they all returned to the camp of the Fianna in the forest, and everyone was glad to see Finn once again, looking as well as he ever had. And it is said that in the place where that goblet fell into the earth, an oak tree sprouted up, and that anyone who fasts for 3 days and sits beneath that oak tree, listening to the wind in its branches, shall have all knowledge of the past, the present, and the future. So it is said. And as for Finn, that night he slept. And as he slept he had a dream, and he dreamed of that great mountain of Slieve Gullion. And in his dream he saw a young girl walking happily across this mountain with flowers in her arms that she had gathered. And as he watched inside the dream, this girl became a mature woman, a mother perhaps. And as she watched, this adult, beautiful woman became an old woman, walking, hobbling with a cane across that mountain, across its slopes, still happy in her heart to be there, beneath the wide sky and the laughing, whispering grasses. And as Finn dreamed on, this old woman became tired and lay down on the side of that mountain, and she slept. And as she slept, she became the stones and the grasses and the earth of that mountain. And now Finn could feel her breath in the wind. And now, listening to the stones in his dream, he could hear the thrumming of her great heart in the center of every stone, and in the dark heart of that mountain. Well, eventually Finn awoke. It was just before dawn. He went out of his tent. The blue light of the pre-dawn hour was in the sky. The birds were beginning to sing. And Finn sat down on a stone and looked at that mountain for a long time. When have you ever stumbled into a relationship with powers greater than yourself? When have you, or I, or any of us, ever accidentally met up with powers greater than our own? That's what happens in this story. Finn encounters a woman who's more than just a young woman. She is magical, and things happen. One thing leads to the next, and before long, the Fianna are digging through a hill, not knowing exactly why. I think of nature. I think of storms. I think of wind. Great thunderstorms. I used to live in the Midwest in Minneapolis. And in Minnesota, you get big storms. In the Midwest, you get big storms. Just biblical, huge storms. I remember bicycling once in Minneapolis. I had not looked at the weather, I guess. I was oblivious. It was a beautiful day. Blue sky, sun shining down, birds in the trees. And then I turned around, and behind me there was a wall of black cloud going all the way up to the top of the sky, white at the top like heads of cauliflower, just sort of growing, coalescing, and beneath them gray, and beneath them black darkness and lightning flickering far off. I turned around and went home as fast as I could. So storms come to us. They arrive out of the air, out of the wind, like commandments, like decisions made by a sky god somewhere. Places like the Midwest, lots of sky. So you get a sky god situation in the world of the Lakota Sioux, I would dare to say, for example. So that's one example. Sometimes an animal does it, in my experience. You are going along and suddenly there's this appearance. Could be a coyote, could be a mountain lion, could be a bird, an eagle, or a hawk. I don't know what your answer is, but I'm inviting you to think about that. Yes, you out there listening, I know you're there. I'm inviting you to consider this. Because we go along, well, I don't know how you go along, but I mean, many of us in this world, we go along as if everything's sort of human-centered and humans are in control, and that's the most important element. But then now and then you get a vision. You know, you're driving through a road in California and a mountain lion just goes right across the road ahead of you. I saw that once and I was like, wow, what is that? So animals do it, nature does it. But many would say there are powers beyond these. Some would even say the animals are themselves messengers from a divine presence. In the Bible, God, is showing up all the time, especially in the Old Testament, giving messages to Moses, speaking with Moses. And in stories like this, in this story in particular, Finn MacCool seems to run into something larger than he's encountered before. As I've said elsewhere on this podcast, in reference to these stories in particular, to me these stories seem to take place in a realm of forgetfulness, where it's not straight up relationship with the divine powers, but it's sort of this world where they're there, but we don't actively make offerings. Finn and his fellas, it's not like the Greek world of the Odyssey, for example, where the characters are continually being visited by the gods, and they're speaking to them, they're in relationship with them, and they make offerings, they make sacrifices to the gods. The realm of the Mahabharata is very similar as well. So there's a deep interrelation, and you can fall in love with the gods, or they fall in love with you, and that's not always a good thing, and you can get killed by the gods. So this world does not seem to be like that, but nevertheless, Finn and the other characters, they stumble into connection with the divine powers, which in this story, to me, feels like what is happening. And Finn is just going along as we go along, hunting. We go hunting, we go shopping, we go wandering through the world, and then something happens. Suddenly his dogs are gone, the deer is gone, and there's this lady there who puts him under a geisha, which, as I said in the story, is a commandment that you must obey if you're really going to be a part of this world and society at all. Traditionally, they are imposed by druids, because druids are the keepers of the laws and the wisdom of the community. And so they know what needs to happen. And if they have the authority to pronounce a geisha on someone, because you must do this or it's going to endanger the health of everybody, is the implication. But as time goes on, in these stories in particular, the geisha is employed more and more, almost as a storytelling device occasionally, I would say. In this story, this mysterious woman puts him under a geisha. He's got to get the ring. He does so, and boom, he's, 1,000 years old. So this woman has a backstory, I should just say right up front. Let me tell you the backstory. All these Finn MacCool stories, they exist in many versions in Scotland and in Ireland, and there's many versions of this particular story. So if you remember in the beginning of the whole Finn MacCool cycle, as I told it, he ran into a young woman in a field who said, wild boy, wave on the sea, wild boy, will you dance with me? And now here she is in the appearance of a older but still a youthful, beautiful woman. So if you look at other versions of this story, this woman has a name, and that name is Meluchra, and she is a goddess, and she is one of a pair of goddesses, her sister being Aina. And the way another version of the story goes is that these two sisters both fell in love with Finn MacCool, but Aina had made a vow previously never to sleep with a man with gray hair. So to ensure that she would not sleep with Finn before she got a chance to, Meluchra did this thing where Finn's under a spell and he gets really old. And in that version of the story, he regains his youthfulness, but his hair remains gray. And because of this, Aina will not have him, and the story goes on from there. That's a cool story. I like it. But the thing is, in my version of this, we've already had a recognition scene with Finn's silvery bright hair, because I took the parts of my version of the childhood of Finn from a Scottish version of this story, in which his hat comes off, and indeed he's discovered by a king because he has silvery bright hair. So that version can't coexist with this one where he gets silvery bright hair later, as you can understand. So this is the mechanics of all this, because there's all these versions. It's kind of crazy. As a storyteller, you get to pick which ones you want to use, and that's one way of expressing yourself through these stories. I should also say I like the silvery bright hair coming in earlier because it connects Finn with the vision Eith had, the wizard, in his tower of Ireland out on the sea. If you remember, it was a cold winter's night, and he saw this magical land that was silvery bright because the moon was shining on it, far out at sea. And I like that Finn's hair kind of connects with that in the same words, because Finn is often equated in these stories with the landscape of Ireland. He knows it well. He is of it in a deep way. So I like that those two things came together in that way. So in still other versions of this story, these two goddesses rule over the year, the bright and the dark parts of the year. So Meluchra is the goddess of winter and darkness. So when Samhain comes, November 1st, she kind of takes her throne as the goddess of the year. And then when 6 months have passed, then Aina takes over. So she's a goddess of winter, which makes perfect sense because, it makes sense that she brings age to Finn, because that's what she represents, is the wintering of the year, when the cold wind comes and plants die, people hibernate, etc. In some versions of the story, she's also the Cailleach, which I may or may not be pronouncing correctly, forgive me, which is a more ancient goddess of the land and of Ireland itself, or herself. And she is the land, basically, and is simply one goddess who turns to stone in the winter and then is youthful again in the spring. And so Finn's running into some heavy-duty powers here. And again, we see this interesting quality of these stories, where up front they seem to be concerned with men. Like most of the main characters are men. They run around with their swords, fighting stuff. So on the surface seems fairly male-centered. Yet the goddess And the feminine principle is everywhere present in these stories, with the women that care for Finn, Leah Luchra and Beaumont, for example, his mother, Myrna, and the divine appearances, the divine beings. So, like in this story, we have the goddess, basically, all of a sudden. So it's an interesting, it's interesting to us in the modern world because we want characters that are equally split between male and female, generally speaking. We want to have men and women as the main characters so we can all connect with this story. But here in this story, which is several hundred years old, we have male and female, but the men run around sort of doing stuff. The women, the female principle, is more, it's the powerful goddess figures. And I'm reminded of, the Gayokono, the Cayuga First Nations peoples who live where I live, Ithaca, New York, in the Finger Lakes. And like many First Nations tribes, in my understanding, at least of the Haudenosaunee around here, the men are the chiefs, but the women, the elders, have control of the chiefs, basically. If the male chief is doing things that people don't like or is wrong or is messing things up, the female elders, not the male elders, but the female elders can revoke that chieftaincy from this male person. So interesting balance of power there. And we see this in other cultures as well. And I would, my strong hunch is it was that way also in the ancient Norse world. Just with that seems like a jump, right? But just with the combo there of the fertility gods and goddesses sort of behind the scenes and the more masculine sky gods in the forefront of things and the dynamic between them. That's a hunch, hey, don't say it's a fact, but I suspect. And we could even say possibly that's the way it was before agriculture. Perhaps hunter-gatherer cultures in general share this quality and this mode of organizing their societies. How's that for going out on a limb there? We'll see. We can knock those ideas around a bit and see if they hold up. But in this story, without a doubt, we have Finn encountering the goddess and going afoul with her, and becoming very old. And of course, if Meluchra wants to sleep with Finn, this doesn't seem like the best plan. But the story doesn't have anything more to say about that, so we will just have to wonder. What in fact happens, of course, is his fellows come and save him by tunneling down into this hill. I think it's kind of hilarious that they just start digging. It's a kind of a childish, idiot brain kind of a thing to do. Let's just dig. I see construction projects going on sometimes, and I'm like, oh, they're digging for that cup of healing. Anyway, but they dig down, and eventually they sort of wake up her father, who arrives. And again, in some versions, that's a phrase I'm saying a lot, in some versions he is in fact the god of the sea, Manannan, but not in every version. And we've heard from the Lord of the Sea a bunch of times in these stories as I am telling them, and so I felt we should give him a rest and have just another nameless magical being come out of this hill, which is, of course, where the invisible ones live, the Tuatha Dé Danann, who were, driven away from above ground into the earth below our feet. So that's some of the background of this story. And I would ask again, you and myself, when do we encounter the divine? Maybe we never do. That's the thing. I mean, I know I've talked about this before, but like I went to church as a kid and I never really was into it, but in the most basic terms, religion is a means by which we are in relationship with powers that we don't understand. Death, birth, the powers that bring great disasters upon us, which we don't understand. The powers which perhaps give us gifts and we don't expect them. Religion is a way to be in dialogue and relationship with those powers. Like I say, I don't go to church, but these stories, for me, serve that function because they're speaking of those relationships. And I like it because the world is pretty boring if it's just people on a ball of dirt in the space, and when we die, it's all over. I don't know what I believe. I'm not going to just write down and make a big statement about what I believe. I'm not sure what I believe, but I like my imagination and my heart fills with joy when I have these stories which address the larger, bigger, wilder world and often give it a name and a face and give it actions to do. And here it is, this man climbing out of the hill, this woman putting Finn under a spell. And some would say, as I mentioned earlier, some would say that the natural world itself is the speech of the divine, is the divine manifested. It's like you see a beggar on your street, or as we would say now, a homeless man or woman. And are they simply that, or are they a divine being? Is it Odin, perhaps, in disguise? Is it Zeus in disguise, come to test you, come to see what you're made of, what you're worth, what you're willing to do? And will you help that person? Will you not? Will you help this woman with their ring or not? And what are the consequences of that choice? If you help this nameless being that shows up like dust on your doorstep, what are the consequences? What is your reward? How will your life be changed? I think that's the story. That's the question this story asks of us. Thank you for listening to this story. There are more stories on my website, which is jayleeming.com, JAYLEEMING.com. And if you are able to support this podcast, please do so. You can do that on patreon.com, patreon.com/storyjl. That helps to make this happen. So I can set up this tent of sound and silence, and we can sit here and talk about these things which matter and are important and are in many ways the meat of life, what really matters. Thank you for listening to this story, and take care. Hey, yeah.